In the heart of the American South, along a remote path known as the Wolf Trail, lies a quiet stream. Today, its waters run clear, its banks are peaceful, and its name is all that remains of a violent past: Burnt Corn Creek. In the summer of 1813, this land was a tinderbox. The United States was embroiled in a second war with Great Britain, and the southern frontier was on edge. But the most immediate conflict was not with a foreign power. It was a schism tearing apart one of the most powerful indigenous confederacies in North America, the Muscogee, known to Americans as the Creek. Here, a bitter civil war was brewing, a struggle for the very soul of the Creek Nation. And on July 27th, a botched American ambush on this quiet creek would provide the spark that ignited a devastating inferno. It was a fight intended to prevent a war. Instead, it became the first shot. For centuries, the Muscogee Creek Confederacy was the dominant power in the American Southeast, a sophisticated network of autonomous towns and clans bound by kinship and tradition. Their land spanned millions of acres across what is now Alabama and Georgia. But by the early 19th century, their world was fracturing under immense pressure. Decades of contact with European Americans had created a profound ideological divide. The lower Creeks, living closer to the American frontier, had increasingly adopted aspects of white culture. Many had become successful traders and planters, embracing the American government's civilization program, which promoted settled agriculture, Christianity, and the concept of private property. But in the more isolated upper towns, a powerful nativist movement was gaining strength. They saw assimilation not as progress, but as a poison, a surrender of their identity and a betrayal of their ancestors. This was more than a political disagreement. It was a war of ideas, a battle for the future of the Creek people. In the fall of 1811, a visionary from the north brought this simmering conflict to a boil. His name was Tecumseh, a Shawnee war chief who dreamed of a great pan-Indian confederacy, a united front of all tribes from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico to halt the relentless advance of the United States. He traveled south to deliver his message directly to the Creek National Council. Where today are the Pequot, the Narragansett, the Mohican? They have vanished before the avarice and oppression of the white man as snow before a summer sun. We must smoke the same pipe and fight the same battles. Let the white race perish. They seize your lands, they corrupt your women, they trample on the ashes of your dead. Tecumseh's call to arms was electrifying. He urged the Creeks to cast off American goods, abandon the plow for the war club, and reclaim their ancestral traditions. While the established Lower Creek chiefs rejected his message, it found fertile ground among the disaffected warriors of the upper towns. They were tired of land cessions and broken treaties, and they saw in Tecumseh's vision a path to restoring their power and dignity. As if sent by the spirits themselves, a powerful omen seemed to validate Tecumseh's prophecy. Shortly after he departed, the most violent series of earthquakes in recorded North American history shook the continent's core. The ground liquefied, and the Mississippi River was seen to run backward. To many Creeks, the message was clear. The world was being turned upside down, and the time for war was at hand. Inspired by Tecumseh, a militant faction arose among the Upper Creeks. They became known as the Red Sticks, named for the red-painted war clubs that symbolized their declaration of war. This was not yet a war against the United States. It was a civil war. Red Stick prophets preached a message of spiritual purification, and their followers began to attack the property of the assimilationist chiefs, destroying their livestock and plantations, the very symbols of the white culture they rejected. Among the Red Stick leaders were men of complex backgrounds. Peter McQueen was a prominent chief and trader of mixed Scottish and Creek ancestry, a fervent believer in the nativist cause who now led warriors from the town of Tbilisi. Another was William Weatherford, known as Red Eagle, Also of mixed heritage and related to some of the most powerful families in the Creek Nation, Weatherford was a wealthy planter and skilled horseman who, despite his deep connections to the American world, ultimately was drawn into the Red Stick struggle to defend his people's land and sovereignty. These men were now leading a nation against itself, a conflict that would soon spiral beyond their control. By July 1813, the Red Sticks were preparing for a wider conflict, but were desperately short on modern weapons. To arm themselves, Peter McQueen, along with Chiefs High Head Jim and Josiah Francis, led a contingent of several hundred warriors south to Spanish-held Pensacola. Spain, an ally of Great Britain in the War of 1812, had a vested interest in destabilizing the American frontier and was willing to aid the Creeks. In Pensacola, the Spanish governor provided McQueen's party with a supply of gunpowder and lead, officially for hunting purposes, but everyone knew its true purpose. Emboldened, the Red Sticks began their return journey, their pack horses now laden with the munitions they needed to escalate their war. News of the Red Stick mission spread like wildfire across the Mississippi Territory, causing widespread alarm. Spies and settlers, including James Corns, whose own property had been burned by McQueen's party on their way south, reported that the Red Sticks were now armed and openly declaring their intent to attack American settlements. The senior militia officer in the region, Colonel James Caller, decided to act. A leading politician on the Tombigbee settlement, Caller was a man of action. He quickly organized an expeditionary force of about 180 men to intercept McQueen and seize the ammunition. His force was a microcosm of the divided frontier. It included white volunteers from various settlements and, crucially, a company of allied Lower Creeks who saw the Red Sticks as a threat to their own safety and stability. The two forces were now on a collision course. McQueen's warriors, burdened by their pack train, made their way north along the well-worn Pensacola trading path. Meanwhile, Colonel Caller led his mounted militia eastward, crossing the Alabama River and gathering reinforcements. Their target was Burnt Corn Creek, a known resting spot where they hoped to ambush the Red Sticks and capture their vital supplies. Around noon, Caller's scouts located the Red Stick camp in a peninsula of low ground formed by a bend in Burnt Corn Creek. The warriors were completely off guard. Seeing his chance, Caller dismounted his men on a hill overlooking the camp and organized them for a surprise attack. The ambush was a complete success. The startled Red Sticks, outnumbered nearly 2-to-1, broke and fled in confusion, seeking cover in the thick canebrake and swamp that bordered the creek. The battlefield and the precious ammunition belonged to the Americans. The fight should have been over. But at the moment of victory, military discipline collapsed. Rather than securing the area or pursuing the enemy, the majority of Caller's militia turned their attention to the spoils of war. They began rounding up the valuable pack horses and looting the supplies of ammunition and trade goods. This was a fatal miscalculation, born of a frontier mentality where plunder was often seen as a primary reward of fighting. The strategic objective was forgotten in a rush of individual greed. Officers like Caller, Captain Dixon Bailey, and the famed frontiersman Samuel Dale tried desperately to rally their men, to get them to reform their lines on the hill, but it was no use. Their commands were lost in the frenzy of looting. From the cover of the swamp, Peter McQueen and his warriors watched the American attack dissolve into a disorganized mob. Seeing their opportunity, they regrouped. With a vengeance, the Red Sticks launched a furious counterattack, charging out of the reeds with war clubs and tomahawks, their yells echoing through the pines. The 80 men who had remained in the fight were now caught completely exposed. For over an hour, they fought a brutal close-quarters battle, but they were now on the defensive, their momentum lost, their comrades scattered. The hunters had become the hunted. Panic swept through the American ranks. What began as a retreat turned into what one historian called a disgraceful rout. Men scrambled for their horses, some taking any mount they could find, leaving their comrades to flee on foot. The Red Sticks pursued them for nearly a mile, their victory now absolute. Caller's force that had charged into battle with such confidence was now a scattered and humiliated band of fugitives. The Battle of Burnt Corn was over. The Red Sticks had won the day. The skirmish at Burnt Corn Creek was more than just a frontier battle. It was the point of no return. The American attack, which the Red Sticks viewed as entirely unprovoked, transformed the Creek Civil War into a direct conflict with the United States. The blood spilled on the banks of the creek cried out for vengeance. The Red Stick prophets and war leaders now had the justification they needed to rally support for a massive retaliatory strike. Their target was Fort Mims, a hastily built stockade on the Alabama River. It was filled with hundreds of settlers, allied Lower Creeks, and enslaved African Americans. Crucially, many of its militia defenders had been part of Caller's force at Burnt Corn. On August 30th, just over a month after their victory at the creek, a force of 700 Red Stick warriors, led by William Weatherford and Peter McQueen, descended on the fort. The attack was a stunning success for the Red Sticks, but its brutality horrified the United States. Over 250 of the fort's inhabitants were killed in what became known as the Fort Mims Massacre. The news from Fort Mims galvanized the American frontier. The cry, "Remember Fort Mims," became a call for total war against the Creek Nation. In response, the United States mobilized its forces, and a ruthless, ambitious Major General from Tennessee took command, Andrew Jackson. For the next 8 months, Jackson waged a brutal campaign of destruction, culminating on March 27, 1814, at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, where his army slaughtered more than 800 Red Stick warriors, breaking the back of the resistance forever. In August 1814, Jackson forced the defeated Creek leaders to sign the Treaty of Fort Jackson. As punishment for the war, the Creek Nation, including Jackson's own allies, was forced to cede 23 million acres of their ancestral land, more than half of present-day Alabama and southern Georgia. The path to this catastrophic loss began with a single skirmish. A small fight on a remote creek, a moment of greed, a ferocious counterattack. The Battle of Burnt Corn was the first link in a chain of events that led to the destruction of the Creek Nation, the opening of the Deep South to the Cotton Kingdom, and the rise of Andrew Jackson to the presidency. It all started here, in a forgotten corner of the Alabama frontier, where a fight over guns and gunpowder set the American South ablaze.